sure it wouldn't interest anybody outside of a small circle of friends.
Alexa, turn it up 5 notches.
Look outside the window, there's a woman being grabbed. They've dragged her to the bushes and now she's being stabbed. Maybe we should call the cops and try to stop the pain. But Monopoly is so much fun, I'd hate to blow the game. And I'm sure it wouldn't interest anybody outside of a small circle of friends. Riding down the highway on a motorcycle rim, 13 cars are piled up there hanging on a cliff. Maybe we should pull them back with our towing chain. But we gotta move and we might get sued and it looks like it's gonna rain. And I'm sure
Alexa, stop. Okay. That's a song about bystander effect, if you couldn't figure that out. So bystander effect is the idea that the more people you have around, the less likely you are to get help. And that happens because of diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility is, if there's 5 of you around, you feel less responsible to help an individual than if you're the only one around. Talking about helping in general, okay. Reciprocity norm is if someone helps you, you feel responsible to help them. Social responsibility norm is we feel like we need to help people, especially those who need our help, whether it's children or older people or someone we're responsible for in a situation. So the thing that really set off the research on bystander effect was a case called Kitty Genovese, and you should know about her for the test. And I gave you a video to watch about her. But essentially, she was attacked in New York City. The attack went on for a very long time. Lots of people were looking out their window, but nobody even called the police. And eventually she died. So you can get more details about that from the video on her. But it started this field of research, and the biggest researchers in the field, their names were Latney and Darley, and they found that there are 3 steps that we go through in our head before we decide to help an emergency situation. The first one is we have to notice something's going on. And these days, we all have our head on our phones, and so we're just not aware of what's going around us anymore. So, if it was the break between class and I was sitting on a bench and I was, slumped, maybe nobody would notice me because that may not look out of place. That may not look atypical. The second thing that has to happen is you have to interpret it as an emergency. And that's a tricky step where a lot of strange things can go wrong. There's this very famous case in England where these 2 10-year-old boys found a little toddler who had wandered away from his mom in the shopping center, and they took him and they walked him for a long way, dragging him along while he was crying, and eventually they took him to railroad tracks where they stoned him to death and left him to be run over by a train. And lots of people remember seeing these boys, but they all went, we just thought they were his older brothers, okay? So nobody interpreted it as an emergency. Or a famous study by my advisor was he staged these attacks on a woman, and he would have this guy throw this woman up against a wall, and she would either say, "Get away from me, I don't know you," or "Get away from me, I don't know why I ever married you." And not surprisingly, she got a lot more help when she said, "I don't know you." People were more likely to interpret it as an emergency, even though it was the exact same attack in both situations. And the last step is take responsibility. So this is where Kitty Genovese ran into trouble. People noticed she was being attacked. It's hard not to interpret it as an emergency. She was being stabbed. But people could see other people watching, and they all assumed somebody had already called for help, and so nobody took personal responsibility in the end. Okay, so that's helping behavior and bystander effect here. All right, let's go down here to kind of group behavior. How are we affected by groups? Social facilitation versus social loafing. Okay, social facilitation is when the presence of others enhances our behavior. Okay. And so, you know, my best example that we can all probably relate to is when you're exercising. When you're exercising by yourself, you don't exercise nearly as hard as when other people are watching you. Okay. So that enhances an easily performed task. On the other hand, you can get interference when it's a complicated task. So if you were sitting there trying to do your calculus test, you would not want 5 people staring at you while you were doing it. So social facilitation happens when an easily performed task is enhanced by the presence of others. Social loafing is when you're in a group. You all know this. It happens when we do group assignments in school. Okay. Teacher assigns a group assignment and one person ends up doing all the work because there's no way to individually assess each person's contribution. And so social loafing happens in those situations where there's no way to assess individual input into the situation. Okay. De-individuation is the tendency for us to do things we wouldn't normally do, either in a crowd or when our face is covered. In some way, we're de-individuated. We can't be identified as an individual in this situation. So, for example, you know, you go to a football stadium and everybody sits there and does the wave. You would never do that by yourself, right? Okay. They did a study where they put this bowl of Halloween candy out at Halloween, and nobody was there, but there was a sign that says take only one. And then they recorded the kids that came by, and the kids that had masks on their face stole more candy than kids that didn't have masks on their faces. So that's a good example of de-individuation. Okay. Group polarization. Group polarization is when we get around people that think like we do, and boy, we see this on like Facebook, right? When we get people around people that think like we do, we get even more extreme in our beliefs. So when we don't have to hear anybody else's opinion, when we're only hearing people that agree with us, we get even more extreme. There's a couple reasons that happens. One, when we have all these people telling us, yeah, you're right, we feel more strongly about our beliefs. Second reason is, you know, I might have had 5 reasons for believing we should save the environment, but once I start hanging out with other people, they have another list of reasons. So now I have 20 reasons for believing we should save the environment. Okay, and so there's both informational and kind of emotional reasons why we get more extreme when we're only exposed to like-minded people. And then this last one down here is groupthink. Groupthink is when you're in a cohesive group, a close-knit group, and they make bad decisions because nobody wants to disrupt the group. So, you know, maybe you had this in high school where a close group of friends go, hey, let's steal a car or whatever. And you're like, I don't think that's a good idea, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut. So bad decisions come out of a group where no one wants to disrupt the unanimity of the group or the agreeableness of the group. All right, jumping over here to attraction and liking. Why do we like who we like? Proximity. Okay, proximity. If I were to ask you to tell me how many people you could name in our class right now, okay, you could probably only name the people right next to you for the most part, okay? If any of you went off to college, you probably, you know, knew your dorm mate really well and maybe the people right next to you, okay, but nobody else. In your neighborhood, I can only name the people in my immediate vicinity. I don't know many people beyond that. So proximity is a powerful determinant of liking. We like those people we run into a lot. It ties into mere exposure effect. We like people we're exposed to a lot, and proximity allows for mere exposure. So mere exposure is that we like things that are familiar. And again, we're probably getting back to prejudice. We're probably hardwired that way. Because again, from an evolutionary point of view, it makes sense to wire us to like familiar things and be a little cautious around unfamiliar things like food. And so we like foods we're really familiar with more than we like strange new foods, or music, right? We like our old favorites better than we necessarily like new things right away. And it applies to people too. People we see all the time, we tend to like more than people we don't. When you ask people their favorite letters in the alphabet, they tend to pick those ones that are in their name just because they're so familiar to them. Okay, similarity. Not surprisingly, the more similar you are, the more you tend to like each other. That tends to be very rewarding, which gets into reward theory, right? Okay. We love nothing more than somebody that says, I totally agree with you. You're absolutely right. Okay, so that's rewarding. Also, if you have a lot in common, getting back to similarity, you both get to do things you like to do together. Have you ever dated someone that didn't like any of the things you liked, right? So somebody was always doing something that they didn't want to do. That is not rewarding. Okay, so similarity promotes reward theory, and reward theory says we will date those people that have the most rewards for us associated with us. Types of love. I really should have drawn a diagram here. Shoot. Okay, so you want to know Sternberg's different types of love. Okay, so Sternberg has this triangle. Imagine a triangle here. Okay, we have liking. Okay, liking means just you know each other well. Okay, it really kind of it's what's he call intimacy. He calls it intimacy. So you know each other well. It's your knowledge of another person. We have passion. Okay, which is like sexual attraction, and then we have commitment, meaning you have made a decision that this is going to be a long-term relationship. And I do advise you to write some of these down, or in the book, it's only a diagram, so don't think it's written out anywhere. Look for this triangle diagram. So if we have intimacy alone, we have what's called liking, and that's what we usually call friendships, right? I know you well, but I'm not sexually attracted to you, and we haven't necessarily made a long-term commitment to each other, okay? If you have sexual attraction alone, you have what's called passion, right? Okay, so you're sexually attracted to them, but you don't know them, and you don't have a long-term commitment. And so we call that infatuation, right? It's like when you have a crush on someone you don't know at all. Okay, so that's infatuation. When you have commitment and nothing else, okay, then you have what's called empty love. So at the beginning of an arranged marriage, you have empty love. They don't know each other. They're not attracted to each other. All they have is the commitment. You also see empty love at the end of a marriage, okay, when you're totally pissed off and sleeping in separate rooms. You're still committed. You're going to stay together for the kids, but you don't talk to each other anymore, and you certainly don't feel attracted to each other anymore. So empty love is over here. Okay, so we have intimacy, passion, commitment. Now, if we combine intimacy and passion, that's what we call romantic love, okay? It's when you first get together and you're telling each other all your secrets, and you're physically attracted, right? Okay. If you have intimacy and commitment, you have what's called companionate love, okay? You're in this, you may not have sexual attraction anymore, but you know each other really well, you're each other's best friends, and you're going to stay into the long term. So most marriages end up kind of in this companionate, not compassionate, companionate stage, where maybe the sexual attraction has fizzled a little, but they still know each other very well, and they're still committed to staying there. Okay, along the bottom we have, if we had a drawing here, sorry, we would have, what was over here? Passion and commitment, but no intimacy, okay? So these are the people that get married after, like, knowing each other a week, right? Okay, they're, like, madly attracted to each other. They're like, let's get married, but they really don't know each other, and we call that fatuous love, fatuous love. And then if you got all three, okay, you got all three going on, we call that consummate love, okay? Consummate love. All right, look for that diagram. I hope that made sense. I'll talk to you next chapter. I hope you're all doing really well. I sure do miss you. I'll talk to you soon.